According to the dictionary, the word apocalypse means a doctrine forecasting the ultimate end of the world, the expectation of an imminent cosmic cataclysm in which God destroys the ruling powers of evil and raises the righteous to life in a messianic kingdom. That's the dictionary's definition of an apocalypse. Remember the apocalyptic predictions of 2012? Anybody remember those? The predictions were based on Nostradamus and biblical prophecy, the book of Revelation, and the end or the fall of Rome. And I will say that some people gave up their fortunes and stocks and money and quit their jobs and sold their houses or gave them away. Do you remember that? And then they went off somewhere to wait for this big cataclysmic event to happen. And well, the rest of us waited with apprehension, because even though we may not have believed it, there was a little apprehension there, right? Hoping that 2012 would pass peacefully. And of course, when it did, you remember how disappointed they were. Terribly disappointed that the world, and of course what they decided was that as 2012 passed quietly into 2013, that they had gotten the date wrong. Because apocalyptic thinking has been around since the beginning of organized religion. Before Jesus, the Jews believed that their great prophet Enoch, who they believed had been taken up with his body, was going to return and help them. And then after the crucifixion, of course, the followers of Jesus, who weren't called Christians yet, they were called followers of the way. The followers of the way believed that Jesus had been taken up in his full body and that he would return to save them. The Jews had always been worrying or wanting or wishing that someone would come and save them from the Romans, because the Romans were very hard on them. They were slaves to the Romans and they were treated very badly. And so they were always just waiting for someone to come and help them. And of course, Jesus never did come back, because the truth is that Jesus, who represents spiritual awareness, never left us. He's always, his presence and his energy has always been with us. Besides, nothing outside of us can save us. And so Charles Fillmore, Unity's co-founder, and Ernest Holmes, founder of religious science, and other enlightened teachers, taught that our world is nothing more than an outpicturing of the thoughts we hold about. So our world, this world, the outer world, is nothing more than the thinking that we hold about it. It's an outpicturing of our thoughts. Our bodies are outpicturing of our thoughts. And so, have you ever been told that you had an irreversible diagnosis, or that you had a debt that was so insurmountable that there's no way you could get it paid, or that a certain job was impossible for you? The truth is that there is an insurmountable power that is available to each and every one of us. And those enlightened teachers taught us that we are dealing with the same power that molds the planets. Think about that. The same power that molds the planets is available to you and me to use to change our lives in any way that we want to change them. And since we know that the world outside of us is nothing but an outpicturing of our thinking, if we don't like what's happening, all we have to do is, rather than think about a cataclysmic event where something out there is going to come in here to save us, all we have to do is begin the process of changing what we don't like that's happening in our lives. Muhammad Ali said, "Impossible is just a big word thrown around by small minds who find it easier to live in the world they've been given than to explore the power they have to change it." Don't you love that? That impossible is just the idea that we don't have the power to change this, so we're going to accept what is impossible. And of course, Ernest Holmes said, change the consciousness and the false condition will disappear. Change your consciousness and the false condition will disappear. What's consciousness? Consciousness is the sum of all your thinking, your speaking, and your reacting to your environment. That's consciousness. And consciousness is changeable. We can change consciousness. As Gary Zukav says in his book, The Seat of the Soul, that we're studying now, he says we can actually change the frequency of our light and make it brighter. That's consciousness. And we have to do it by changing the way we think, the way we speak, and our actions. So, since an apocalypse is a doctrine that forecasts the ultimate end of the world, Charles Fillmore taught us that letting go of the past in order to begin again, it can be a personal apocalypse. It could be the end of our world as we know it. So we can have a personal apocalypse. You know, after 25 years of marriage to Arnold Schwarzenegger, Maria Shriver, a very devout Catholic who did not believe in divorce, found herself involved in a very ugly divorce. And in an interview with Art, she was asked how she was dealing with all of that. And you know what? I shall never forget her answer. It really touched me to the core. She said, you have to be willing to let go of the life you planned in order to make the life that you are meant to live. You have to let go of the life you planned in order to make the life you were meant to live. Unfortunately, some people can't do that. And I want to tell you a story of a woman who just absolutely couldn't do it. A woman was unable to let go of the life that she had planned and hating the person that she claimed had messed up the life she had planned, died and went to heaven. Now, we all know that heaven is not a location, it's a state of mind, but for the sake of the story, let's pretend that heaven is a place. So she dies and she goes to heaven, and the woman, she arrives at the pearly gate. Guess who's at the pearly gate? Tell me. St. Peter is always at this pearly gate in all these stories, right? I don't know why, but St. Peter's always there. So St. Peter's at the pearly gate, and he greets her, and he welcomes her to heaven. Shocked that in spite of her inability to forgive and let go, she had not gone to hell. She proclaims, oh my God! Am I in heaven? Well, yes, but you're not in yet, says St. Peter. There's something you need to do before I can let you in. Oh, I'll do anything. What do I have to do, says the woman. Just tell me. St. Peter says, you just have to spell a word. A word? What word? Any word. Any word? I mean, I can spell a silly little easy word like love. St. Peter says, yeah. So she says, L-O-V-E. St. Peter says, come in. She's in. And then, after she does that, St. Peter says, you know what? I have to go to the restroom. So would you mind guarding the gate for me for just a few minutes? I won't be gone more than 15 minutes. She says, guard the gate? What would I do if I have to guard the gate? He says, it's simple, just what I did for you. You just have to, somebody comes to the gate, you just tell them that they can't come in unless they spell a word, and then they can spell any simple little word just like you did. No problem, she says. I'll do it. So she stands by the gate and she's waiting for somebody to come. And she looks out. She's like so excited that she made it to heaven. She can hardly believe it. She's euphoric with the idea. And she looks out and she sees way out in the horizon a figure moving toward her. And pretty soon she notices it's male. It's a man and he's moving toward her. And oh my God, the closer he gets, she realizes it's the man. It's her husband, the one that messed up the life she had planned to live. And so she sees him coming, and she says, what are you doing here? He says, whoa, am I in heaven? Oh my God, I can't believe it. I'm in heaven? She says, well, not quite. And she says it very sarcastically, and he says, "What do you mean?" And she says, "You got to spell a word before I can let you in." Knowing that he's a very bad speller, she gets this wonderful feeling in her gut. And he says, "Well, spell a word." What word? He's worried because he's not a good speller. She says, "Spell Czechoslovakia." My husband and I were living in Barcelona, Spain, when I realized that I was expecting our fourth child. And since there were no sonograms in those days, we just had to guess what you were carrying. And of course, since I had 2 boys, I was dreaming for another girl. And this wonderful, intuitive psychic walked up to me one day, and she said, "Can I touch your stomach?" And I said, "Yes." And, with very dramatic aplomb, she touches my stomach, she closes her eyes, and then she says, "You're expecting a girl." Oh my God. I was in heaven. All I ever wanted was another little girl, and I was carrying one. So I gave her the name Marissa. That was the name I wanted to call my little girl. We lived in Spain, so the name was really Marisa. But we called her that all the time in Detroit. Every time we referred to the baby, we referred to Marissa. And we went shopping for girl clothes. And in those days, they were always pink. So we got a whole wardrobe of pink clothes. We got a pink skirt for the crib, around the crib. And then we went to have the baby. And what a surprise. Not a 10-pound boy. We didn't even have a name because we've been calling him Marissa for so long. So I thought, well, Eric's a good name. We picked that name, and that was his name. And the whole thing was so beautiful. That whole pregnancy was so incredible. I've always said to a friend I have here in the congregation that the Waltons was always my favorite program. And that's the kind of life I had planned to live. Now, I had 4 children. I was hoping to have 6. And I was going to stay home and bake bread and make cookies. My mother was a businesswoman, so I never experienced coming home to the smell of brownies in the house. I came home to an empty house and had chores that had to be done before Mama got home or I'd be in trouble. So I was going to be different. I was going to be the stay-at-home mom and have all these babies, and I learned to make bread, and I learned to cook wonderful things, and I lasted 6 whole months in my entire life. So for 6 months, I was the Walton mother. I had my baby, I had my boys and my girl, came home to wonderful smells of baked bread, and life was so good. It was just wonderful. The life I had planned was perfect, absolutely perfect. Except that my husband, who was getting restless with that life, was bored. He didn't like it. He liked our nomadic life where we were always traveling and going and living here and living there and trying this. We had lived in 10 different places while we were together, and he loved that. So now we're settled in this incredible little town called Coventry, which was the closest thing to heaven you've ever seen in Connecticut. And the University of Connecticut was just a few miles away, and it was just perfect. And he decided to find some distractions away from home. And like Maria Shriver, it took a personal apocalypse before I became willing to let go of the life I had planned and create the life I was meant to live. And scriptures say, "You shall decide on a thing, and it will be established for you." You shall decide on a thing, and it will be established for you. When I decided to let go of the life that I had planned, even though it took 7 years, the life I was meant to live began to be established for me. I had no idea at that point that I would become a minister, but I went back to school and I worked on a PhD and I did all kinds of things. And the beautiful thing about this is that when you decide on a thing, it shall be established for you even if it means that you move from place to place, from people to people, from job to job, but it is being established because you've decided to let go of what didn't work anymore. And now you're working towards something that works for you. And so whether it be the death, if you've had a personal apocalypse, whether it be the death of somebody special in your life, or a divorce, or the loss of a job, or retirement, loss of a retirement package. I've spoken to a few people that have experienced that. They dreamed about retiring and then they lost their retirement package. If it means a financial crisis that you don't think you'll ever pull out of, when you let go of the life that you had planned in order to start the life that you really want to live, regardless of the circumstances, life begins to change. And it changes slowly. It took 7 years for mine to totally change, but it changes. It changes slowly for the better. And here's why. Because when you finally set your intention, as Gary Zukav says in his book, The Seed of the Soul, when you make a conscious choice. Conscious choices are so important. When I look over my life, in our last class, I was sharing with the class that I haven't made too many conscious choices. I'm making them now, but there are so many times in my life that I just made a choice. It wasn't a conscious choice. A conscious choice means that you weigh everything. You say, wow, let me look at what can come out of this. How is this going to happen? What will this work? How will we work through this? And you look at all of it. Then you make a conscious choice. And when you make a conscious choice, you're really deciding on a thing. You're deciding, you're really making a decision that's conscious. And once you decide on a thing, the process of it being established for you begins. So it's a matter of really making that conscious choice, making that decision, deciding on a thing. If you've been wavering here and there and everywhere and nothing happens, you have to decide on a thing, even if it takes years. Something new and unexpected will eventually move into your life and fill the empty space. It really will. And here's the way it works, metaphysically. That being established moment, the verse says, decide on a thing and it shall be established for you. That being established moment, which can be a day, a week, a month, or years, that being established moment energy, which is created by thoughts, words, and actions, becomes a prototype, eventually that changes into the life you were meant to live. So that actually becomes a prototype, that energy becomes a prototype of the life you were meant to live. For me, it was being a counselor at a high school, Bakersfield High School in Bakersfield, and I was a senior counselor, so these girls were pretty mature, and they'd come in and they'd tell me their problems, and I would say, well, if you don't tell anybody, I'll pray with you. I don't know where that came from, but I used to do that. After we'd have a counseling session, if they were still a little upset, and they never told anybody, I would have been fired. In those days, you really weren't allowed to do that. And a few of them would say, Mrs. Johnson, you ever thought of being a minister? You'd be a good minister. And I said, minister? Really? Well, when I was a little girl, I wanted to be a minister, but a minister now? Yeah. And they started planting the seed for me. And eventually it, of course, bloomed into the life I was meant to live, which was being the mother of a congregation. I wanted to be the Walton mother. Well, I am the Walton mother. I have lots and lots of children. And I invite friends to visit me that aren't really my blood children, but I call them my children, my son, my daughter, my this, my that. And so I'm an earth mother. I have lots of children. And you are some of them. Of Course in Miracles says, deny your strength and weakness becomes your salvation. Deny your strength and weakness becomes your salvation. And it says, see yourself bound and bars become your home. Whatever you think will happen in your life. And so our affirmation today is, I make room for what is being established for me. Thanks to Mary, we now have the affirmation in our bulletin. So take it out so you can read it with me. And take it with you this week. And affirm it, because affirmations really work if we believe them. And if we really trust that we are becoming part of that great quantum field that we live in. So together we say, I make room for what is being established for me.